missed that whole intro. Okay, can you guys hear us now? I'm sorry. Of course something has to go wrong. We're live, right?
Right? That's the way it goes.
Can you guys hear us now? Oh, thank you. I'm glad we caught that early. Okay.
Awesome. Cool.
Thank you, everyone. I am so sorry. I'm a noob. I apologize. We caught it early. We didn't go for 2 hours with no sound. Awesome. You guys know who this man is. Daniel Fox, I already did an introduction. He needs no introduction. Like I said earlier, the hardest working man at tabletop role playing today. He was just describing how Zweihander came about.
That's
So
right.
start
So
with D and
we,
D. It's the gateway drug for all of us, I think, when we start playing role playing games. And then you found Warhammer.
yeah, that's right. I discovered Warhammer much later on than I wasn't really originally a Warhammer fan. I knew about the rules. I didn't like the world, but I loved the way that the career system was set up. I love the idea of pathing through those things because the multi-classing thing in D&D was always really interesting to me. But the way that Warhammer had set that up, and an older book too, Stormbringer, was really interesting. So I was like, well, maybe there's something here to like frame up this yet unknown game, this unnamed game rather. So we kind of started off like, well, what if we did like this kind of like thing, just call it Corehammer. So we started kind of framing up like, all right, here's what we like about Warhammer, here's what we don't. So the first thing we did is we said, okay, snip, we don't like the world. So we're like, let's just break it down to its barest essentials. Let's take the foundations of those rules and pluck out what is interesting to me. So I created this kind of early on version called Core Hammer, and I didn't think there'd be much of a really of a following on it. I posted it randomly on Strike to Stun. I think it would have been almost 7 years ago now, and there were a lot of people, a lot of good comments, a lot of people coming in and saying, "Yeah, this is really interesting. You should do something with this." So after that, I started to like really write it. I was like, "Okay, there's something here I could do." So I just started writing everything I possibly could down. And I'm sure for those of you who read the book, I'm a pretty verbose person. Apparently, I didn't know this about myself. I never written anything my entire life. So say for college papers. So I wrote this giant book in Google Docs. It's where it kind of lived. And I was like, all right, now it just kind of sat. It sat for a year or so. And I'd pencil in stuff here and there. And like, yeah, maybe we'll name it something. Maybe something real will come out of it. And then suddenly like the name kind of dawned on us during a conversation on Strike This Down. We're like, we're going to call it Zweihander. And it's going to be this world agnostic thing that I could use at my game around my table for my homegrown campaign, but we can also make it to where it is usable for other worlds too. So I was like, oh yeah, this makes sense for like, the 30 Years War. Like it goes directly into European history. We could use it for The Witcher before the Witcher game came out. We ran it with Black Company. We ran it with a periphery of other games like Game of Thrones, and we also did like The Gentleman Bastards, and we kind of did all these kind of frame ups around. We're like, all right, this game works with other game worlds. Now let's make it completely world agnostic, like original D&D, and that's our approach to market. So I put out the beta version, and we had a ton of downloads, and so we're like, all right, let's bring it to Kickstarter. Let's raise $7,000 and print like 100 books, and that turned into somewhere around 5,300 pre-orders. And
Wow.
after that, a year and a half later, we're like, all right, now we've got 12,000 books out in the wild. And then a year after that, after launching on Drive-Thru RPG, today we've sold somewhere around it's almost 69,000 PDFs across Drive-Thru RPG, across our digital front for Kickstarter, across our digital front for CrowdOx, and now Backer Kit. We've sold somewhere around, I think it's 20, I'm going to say it's 29,000 physical copies, not including the pre-orders we just got out of our last Kickstarter from Gauche. So it's turned into this like thing, and I say silly little RPG because I still kind of see it that way, even though it's like we put a lot of money and time and care into it to curate it, so to speak, to create what I feel is a well produced from a material perspective RPG. So that's when I said silly little RPG, that's what I mean. It's this thing that it's like we have played, I mean, every year for like 7 years almost. Wow. In one format or another, and we still play test, we still run it. That hasn't stopped, and that of course has spawned the follow-up to it, Main Gauche, which we just had on Kickstarter not too long back.
Very successful Kickstarter.
Yeah, it went really well, and we've just kind of just been. We're like, all right, maybe this is kind of really, really real now, and that brought us to Gen Con, and that kind of changed our world. That kind of became like that kind of changed everything.
And this is the Ennies you're
Yeah,
leading into.
so
All right.
that's right. So when I say we, I mean myself and Adam Rose. So Adam, who's not here tonight, he's our rules developer. He's kind of behind the scenes guy.
And I don't want to sell him short because he is equally as hardworking. If you're on the Discord
Yeah.
channel and you ask a rules question, Adam like is instantly answering your question for you, or within hours.
Yeah, he's on it. He's kind of like, in a sense, like Adam is kind of like my foil. He kind of gut checks a lot of the stuff that we do. He also helps kind of conduct our play tests around the table. He's an active player. We play together every Wednesday in my basement. I mean, continuously. Most of the people who play test is Zweihander. We still play every Wednesday. But Adam, he's our rules developer, and so what happened is we found out about the nomination. We're like, oh, best game and product of the year in the Ennies. That's kind of a big deal. So it's happened like 2 weeks before the Ennies, and for Gen Con, we're like, well, fuck, we gotta. Sorry, is that okay if I say?
Yeah, it's fine.
All right, cool.
That's
All
okay.
right. I had to catch myself sometimes. I was like, we better get our tickets. So we decided to drive because we live in Kansas City, Missouri, and we drove out to the convention center, and it's my first convention I've ever been to. The Ennies were incredible, well produced, met a lot of good people there. My intention was just to go and shake hands and maybe talk to some nominees or winners and just kind of learn more about the industry, because really the only thing that I had known about the RPG industry was I kind of parlayed my day job stuff, my business development and marketing stuff into Zweihander to grow it. So I was like, there's definitely something material there, but I wanted to understand kind of like what's it mean for distribution and shipping, and how do you reach scale, and et cetera, et cetera. So all the questions that I'm sure indie kind of creators kind of go through in the very beginning stages. So we go to the Ennies. I had no speeches prepared whatsoever, and then we get announced for best game. I'm like, oh shit, okay, now I got to talk on stage. So we both get up there, and I'm really nervous, and I'm like, I'm not even sure what to say. So we go through that, and they're like, okay, all right, that's it. It's got to be it, right? Just best game, gold. So then like product of the year is Zweihander. So we go back up there, and it's just been since then. It's incredible. I mean, there's no way we could have gotten there. I mean, granted, I love this book and it's amazing and stuff, but really we kind of owe it to the fans, because if it wasn't for you guys, there's no way we would have made it to the Ennies, much less sold more than our 100 whatever books like 2.5 years ago on Kickstarter. So thank you all who have helped kind of support us over the years. We've tried to do our best to put our best foot forward, to be open and communicative, like you mentioned before, on Discord as well on social media. We've tried to remain engaged with the community. We've tried to put a lot of player-facing and game-facing products. So our Magic cards, our character folios, our Game Master screens. I think we're up to 16 products in less than a year and a half. Wow. That we've produced at this point, not including what the community is now creating on the Grim and Perilous library at Drive-Thru RPG.
Yes, which is very cool.
Yeah, so we wanted to open the book up for Creative Commons licensing, so anybody could take it and kind of create their own stuff. And that was kind of the first step. We're like, open source role playing, OSR. That was our vision of what it meant. So we worked with Drive-Thru RPG shortly before the Ennies and talked to Chris Tang, and he was amazing. He was like, yeah, let's do a community content library like DM's Guild, and it's like, we want to allow people to create their own stuff. So threw our packs up there, threw templates up there. We're like, all right, go hog wild. So now I think there's 27 different individual community content pieces. People like creators have made it. Fans of Zweihander.
Yeah.
And it's only been up for 5 months. So we're moving at a pretty steady pace.
Yeah, no, it's awesome. People are finding out about it, and people are producing products and continue to produce products. So yeah, it's very cool to get the community involved in that way as well, to make them a part of this book, this game. So yes, so you've covered a whole bunch of my questions right off the bat in that opening spiel. So thank you.
Well, we can dive into any of those as you need to. I thought I wanted to maybe. I know we kind of did an open format, and frankly, this is my second video interview I've ever done. So if I'm okay, fast, say well, you need to slow down.
No,
It's
no,
all
no.
your A material now.
No, no, you covered the elevator pitch, you covered the Annies, you covered the conception and what drove you to produce this product. So no, that's awesome. You did mention OSR, and I had a
Yeah.
question about that. So
Mhm.
recently on the Discord, I saw a little exchange between a couple of users on there, and someone
Yeah.
specifically said, "Do you think Zweihander is OSR?" It's kind of a question. Nobody ever touched on it, and I kind of got me thinking. I was like, well, I do. No, I'm
Right.
curious your take on. Do you think it's OSR? What do you think of the OSR movement that's happening right now in role playing games? I think the company that you were in with the Annie nominees
Mhm.
speaks volumes to the
Yeah.
current state of OSR in role playing games.
Yeah, and that's a good observation, specifically about the OSR. So to kind of to walk through the unpack those questions. So is Zweihander OSR? And I think to answer that question, I have to first maybe describe my definition of what I think OSR is, because there are many different definitions.
Right.
Some people see it steeped in D&D. Some people see it just saying, "Oh, it's inspired by old school revival games." And in my mind, it was always about like open source role play. And this is part of my own myopia to kind of what was going on in the industry. I've been so focused on creating content that I don't really feel I don't really have a good understanding of kind of what's happening beyond what we're doing. And of course, as I begin to kind of uncover all this, I'm like, oh, SR, like this means many different things to many different people.
Hmm.
And in fact, there was a poll that was sent out recently by Questing Beast. He has reviewed Zweihander. He is perhaps one of the foremost video reviewers of OSR games now. And he reviewed it and called it an OSR game. So when I think about OSR, I think about like open source role playing, meaning you could take Zweihander and you could turn it into anything you want. Like you can literally take Zweihander and rewrite it from the ground up. You want to turn it into I don't know, a Wild West game, you could do that because it's meant to be unpacked and created however you want. But the movement for the OSR, like I think what you mentioned before about the Ennies, so we shared the stage with James Raggi, Zach Smith, several other people who have just been like, they've got a line of trophies behind them. And James Raggi he's by far one of the most prolific, I wouldn't call them authors, but publishers. He essentially wrote Lamentations of the Flame Princess, and now they're just like this huge catalog material around it because his play was to say, use the foundation for my game and write your own things and I will publish it. And he's been very successful with that. And to me, that is interesting because he's just one guy. And I think that, love him or hate him, agree with his politics or not, it's an interesting model to follow. It's a very interesting model because he is one of the only people out there, save for larger companies who are investing a ton of money into marketing and live play and things like that, who has managed to like literally like be able to seal in the idea of the OSR revolving around Lamentations. So that inspires a lot of other creators, which is awesome. I love that. I love the fact the OSR is very much kind of DIY. There's no like big brand behind it. You're not like contending. We don't have to fight with Paizo or Wizards. Like you just kind of create your own thing and you can kind of push it forward and people will take it and recreate it and make their own version. So it's almost like this, we're all kind of like baking the same thing, but our recipes are different. We're all baking apple pies or rhubarb pies, whatever it may be, but our methods of creating those pies are different. So when I view the OSR, I think of it in the same perspective. Like we're all creating kind of our own DIY games, and hopefully people have the opportunity to, take from their basements and like win awards, and that'd be awesome. But more importantly, like I think the OSR to me is really about open source role play, about being able to adapt the work that's out there and create your own thing. And to me, beyond all the bickering over, what isn't or what is OSR, does this fit in, does it not, like all the weird kind of like politics and D&D game bullshit and all that nasty stuff, what it boils down to me is that I'm just here to like make games, and I want people to make games too, and I hope enable them to do that through Zweihander, through the Grim and Perilous library, and hopefully share some of my success and some of my kind of like my trip from like Thanksgiving, however many years ago to now, to say, let me help impart you with some of my knowledge to help kind of lift others up and teach them to be good creators and good marketers and good stewards of content.
Cool. Nice. I agree. It's OSR. But what do I know?
Yeah.
And that poll on Twitter is very interesting. Definitely take it if anybody has seen it. Take that and put your input into that. So, Zweihander, what have you learned since publishing it? That's a pretty broad question,
Right.
But let's narrow it down to the book itself. What would you? Yes. I know we're going to the second print now. What would you change if you could go back and do things differently? I got it here. I know when I sent a picture of this to my players, I stacked up D&D. I put the player's manual, the monster's manual, and the dungeon master's guide, and it was bigger than all three of them together with their covers. And they're like, "Holy shit! You expect us to read that? Is that something?" For instance, something that feedback that you've received and that you might change going forward, like splitting into a player's handbook and a dungeon master's guide, and anything else that you've learned since publishing this and going to the second edition.
I'm glad you asked, and it's really relevant to what I was actually discussing tonight with my layout artist Ken Duque and Kenneth, as I call him, or as his mother calls him, and Adam Rose, our developer. So one thing that we've kind of done, one of the things that I think we learned about Zweihander, because it was our first book, because it was the first thing I've ever laid out, there are things that we've learned. We've learned that don't use 3 font types. You need to skinny up the gutters between the columns. White space is important. In breaking up lines of text is important. Now, that being said, I want to share an interesting anecdote with you. So you were talking earlier about Zweihander and Dungeons & Dragons. So Dungeons & Dragons, Player's Handbook, DM's Guide, Monster Manual. Yeah. There's more pages there than Zweihander. Zweihander is thick. There is. Yeah. And there's 688 pages in Zweihander. There's 840 something across those 3 books. As a person who plays D&D, the only thing you need to read is a player's handbook. You don't need to read all of it. You just read what you're playing. The same as Zweihander. The only thing you need to know is the 16 pages of how to play. Yeah. The 8 pages for combat and your profession. So when you look at Zweihander as like, I need to read this whole damn thing to learn to play, the answer is no. I mean, because I don't know anyone who has time to do that, save for game masters like you and I, right? We want to read it all. We want to know it from back to front. And I think that the book size can be intimidating. However, I think it's important to remind people, and I try to do this when I talk about the book, is that the game, even though it is a thick book, that is a book of options. It's not a book of you must know it all. It's a book of options. Just like in Dungeons and Dragons, you're only going to read how I roll dice, how do I play my class, what does my race do, and how do I fight? And that's all you need to know in Zweihander. It's the same approach, and it equates to literally 27 total pages. In fact, we've released that. It's called the Quick Play Guide on Drive-Thru-RPG to help kind of like beginners understand how to digest this massive book. Now, the other things that we've learned is that no matter what you tell people, they're still going to be intimidated by the size of this book. So we're working on a player's guide. We don't know what that name of it's going to be yet, but we're essentially going to take this thing, we're going to slice it in half, and we're going to reshape it, resize it, refactor it to make it more consumable for players. That's going to happen early next year. We don't have a release date for that yet. We're still working through some of the kind of publishing distribution side stuff with that, but we envision that being less than 300 pages.
Wow. Cool.
So that'll be one of the major things that we kind of improve on, I feel.
Yeah. Well, but the plus side also, to just jump back to this, is for the price of admission, I have everything I'll ever need to play this game. So it looks intimidating big, but you have provided me with all of the tools to tell all the stories I want. I have all the creatures, I have all the professions, I have all the dungeon masters or what game master section that I need to run this game. I don't need to go out and buy other books as well. And that's one of the selling points for me when I was looking as well, like aside from the game itself, is like, yeah, it's $50 or whatever it was, but I have all of it right here.
Yeah, low price point. That was part of the marketing strategy too, to step back a little bit. It was that we released the PDF super cheap. It's like $9 on Drive-Thru-RPG. Yeah. And we released the print on demand. We make nothing on it because my intention at first was not to make a bunch of money. It was to like, let me get as many people playing this thing as I possibly can. One, for selfish reasons, because I want to build a brand around it. Mm-hmm. Two, to have a test bed of people to give feedback. I mean, you get in a bubble when you develop games. And I say this because I don't have larger publishing experience, but I have as anybody who's written a game of their own, you play with your buddies, and everyone kind of nods in agreement. You're like, yeah, this is fantastic. And you'll have there's some cognitive dissonance there, right? Even though you'll get feedback from your players, it's not until you kind of take this thing and you say, okay, world, here you go. Please tell me what you think. That you get really good feedback. And that's where our errata was born. That's where our changes in the game was born. We're taking a lot of that errata and feedback and putting it into our second, I wouldn't call it a second edition, but a second print edition.
Mm-hmm.
It's what we're kind of calling our Ennies edition, which we're relaunching with in January with a new publisher. I'll talk about here in a little while. But one of the things that we have learned is that we're listening and we're talking and we're communicating with people who play this, and we're taking that feedback and we're making subtle changes to the game that don't necessarily dismantle the foundation of it, but change it in ways that make sense. Like, because there's clearly some kind of funky things in the book at times I think we run into still. I wouldn't call it game balance, but I would call it, parity between professions. So we've made some changes and adjustments, and I think that, if I could do it all over again, I'd have a Discord set up, and I would basically take this manual and say, okay, guys, play test this and tell me what you think as we go along, so that we could have active feedback beyond our play test group of 14 people. So that's what we did with Main Gauche. That's what we're doing for all our books moving forward. That's one lesson that we've learned. But I'd say the other major lesson really is that, and it's a layout issue, is that we've made a lot of incremental changes to layout over the past 60 days. In fact, we're delaying delivery of Main Gauche and Zweihander second edition prints until February-ish, March maybe, depending on how it kind of pans out. We're moving at a pretty steady pace now. But we're making major overhaul changes to layout because we want to make certain that not only does this meet standards, like publishing standards, the broader standards when you compare it against D&D, Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay, and others, but we want it to be more consumable. And when I say more consumable, I mean that I want it to be easier to read. There's more breathing room on the page. That composition, like, because I'm an artist. I got my start in graphic design many years ago. And one thing I felt was kind of missing from the book is like the composition. Like, there's a lot of great artwork and a lot of great things, but sometimes it feels like a wall of text. Mm-hmm. So we're introducing new artwork. We're cleaning up some content. We actually have new content in the new edition. As an example, we had 10 drawbacks in the original book. We now have 25. Wow. To create more options, because more options is better. Like, more stuff to like. Because a game's longevity is limited by, it is limited by the amount of things that you can do with it. Granted, Zweihander has a ton of options. Main Gauche adds more options onto that. But what we kind of learned along the way is, even though we're kind of making these weird kind of updates in Main Gauche, this is our kind of local copy here, we actually ended up doing some lift and shift, meaning we've taken some content from Main Gauche and plugged it into Zweihander because we knew that it belongs there. It doesn't belong in the separate books. It belongs there. So that enables somebody who just says, I don't want to pick up both books and I don't need both, to be able to pick up Zweihander and have literally a very comprehensive game that has taken under consideration feedback from the community, has layout standards that make sense, that is, quote, print ready for publication at a wider publication scale, and that just feels better. So that's my long-winded speech of saying we learned a lot, and we're applying those lessons.
But that's awesome. You listen. You listen to your audience. Like, I've seen it again on Discord where people have said, like, I don't understand this or that in the rules, and you've said, I'm going to change it in the second printing. Yep, what you're saying makes sense. And there's a lot of creators and people out there who be like, well, that's just the way it is, and it's a quirk of the game and live with it. But you're like, well, I'll change it. What you brought up completely makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, I can, when I look at, it's hard for me not to go direct to like examples like Wizards of the Coast or Cubicle 7. So let's talk first about Wizards of the Coast. They're a very large company, and the way they kind of gather feedback is that they don't really have a feedback loop. Their feedback loop is attracting viewers and people to play the game, and it's a fantastic marketing approach. Then you look at Cubicle 7, who up until about 6 months ago had zero online presence. They've changed that. They're part of the Rat Catchers Guild in Discord. Andy Law, T.S. Lukart, others have like begun engaging with the community and fans, which has been fantastic, because as a long time fan of Cubicle 7, I was really feeling like when Warhammer was announced, I was like, oh, I love Warhammer. Like, I want the new edition. I have the collector's edition right here, number 1553.
That's gorgeous.
And yeah, it's an amazing book. I mean, I'm so stoked to get this. It's super cool. And I was just like, I want to like talk to the devs. I want to like have a conversation about
Right.
like, why did you design it this way? So I thought it would be interesting when we were kind of conceiving of like this. How do we use a feedback loop? How do we communicate with fans beyond social media? How do we talk to people beyond Strike This Done, beyond Reddit? And the answer was Discord. Discord is like this amazing tool to have direct communication. I mean, with you and others, right? It's like we get to talk and like bullshit about games and
Just
talk about why things are designed the way they are. So, and I really feel that, as we move forward, like we intend to use Discord as our primary channel for feedback, because I feel that is a good way to stay involved with the community. Now, granted, at some point or another, like as some RPGs that continue to grow, you have to end up bringing on people to like manage your social media and help manage Discord and stuff. And we kind of pride ourselves on being small and nimble. So although we are kind of, yeah, we're growing at a scale of we're about to reach a pretty big scale here soon. I'll talk about that a little bit later in the interview. But we're about to reach a scale where I'm hoping that we continue to be involved in Discord day to day. Because I have it on my phone. I check in the middle of the day and I like help answer questions and stuff. But I'm trying to invite the rest of the team too, and the play testers who play with us every Wednesday, to get them looped in to help answer questions, because they're as much a part of designing Zweihander as I was. If I didn't have those play testers, this thing would be a big old ugly mess. Frankly. They have been part of the design as much as I have. Even though my name's like in the inside cover, I mean, the credit is due to them for helping, kind of saying, yeah, Dan, that idea is really fucking stupid, or yeah, this one makes sense, or kind of like slyly saying, yeah, that idea is awesome because I can create super optimized characters.
Yeah, right. I mean, max the shit out of this.
Yeah, so I really pride myself, and I think that Adam and others do too, who are involved with Grim and Perilous Studios, our kind of company. Really pride ourselves on being connected to the fans and the community, and we want to continue doing that. There's value in that, like being able to knock on Mike Merle's door, like as the lead designer of D&D, and have him answer a question like, why did you do it this way? Right now you could do it on Twitter. He answers most questions, as does Christopher Perkins and others, which is great. Discord is a different experience.
Much different.
I'm like, I'll if somebody reaches out to me on Twitter about a question, I'm going to answer. I always do. This is kind of my nature. I want to be involved with the community. So, yeah, that's my long and short of it.
and I think that's helped contribute to the continued growth of this game, is that availability and accessibility that you and Adam have. Let's jump over some questions. Take 4 seconds is asked, I think 4 questions here, 3 questions. So they're piling up, and I don't want them to think that we're not going to get to them. So why don't we do a few of those, and then we'll jump back to, I know there's some things to announce and discuss. We got like Tetsubo and the publishing deal and all kinds of other goodies to talk about. So let's jump over a question. He's got a couple of good ones here. So he says, I'm having trouble pitching Zweihander to my players. They're into narrative, story-heavy games, and I think they think of Warhammer and Zweihander as just a hyper-masculine, violent fantasy. That's not. You'll die. I'll tell you that right now if you think it's just all combat. I think it's more than that. How can I sell my players on Zweihander as a system to tell interesting stories?
Good question. So I am a damn dirty, ugly storytelling game player. I love narrativist games. My games that I run, so if anyone's who's like tuned in, I ran Dun Hollow Mystery, which is like my homebrew campaign. It's like the psychological horror thing. I'm a heavy storyteller guy. Like that's what I pride myself on. When we play Zweihander, like at my game table, we run combat like maybe once every 2 sessions. Most of what we do is social intrigue. We do some wilderness travel, do some chase scenes, but we do a lot of story building, because I believe that the foundation of any good role-playing game is not about really hacking madly at things, but about the stories that you tell. And one thing that we kind of aimed for with Zweihander, because we knew that Warhammer, for good or for ill, is steeped in this hyper masculinity. So when we decided to write Zweihander, we're like, all of our artwork going to flip every trope on its ear. In fact, we aim to have a lot of inclusivity in our artwork. We pride ourselves on that. Our artist Dan Mandic, he's from Serbia. He did all the artwork back from cover to cover. And he was like, okay, we're going to take every Warhammer trope, and we're going to do, if it's a white dude, it's going to be a black girl. We're going to take all these different tropes and flip them on their ear, and we're going to make it to where we could say, you don't have to, we're not really selling in this idea of like this combat heavy, intense game. Instead, we're saying this game is about the stories of the people playing the game around the table. So our artwork, as an example, it isn't quote in world, meaning if you look at Warhammer, like everybody's like white and Caucasian. But when we do artwork for Zweihander, it's about us, the players, around the table in these roles. So we're like, I want the artwork to look like the people who are playing the game, wearing the armor and the garb and the clothing of the people that are in the world. So we aim for that with our artwork. But I think that the best way to basically kind of sell it in is, I think that particularly if you read A Bitter Harvest, which is a feminist adventure. It's hard to really say it that way, but it is about the idea of flipping gender roles, flipping the stereotypes on its ear. We often make a lot of jokes in the book about that too, because we kind of have fought, personally, I've fought against this whole thing of like hypermasculinity in role-playing games in the first place. So I poke a lot of fun at that throughout the book. Now, granted, if you can get over the fact that it's a big book, you get over the fact that it's a big size of a book, I would recommend having players, like to sell them, and I'd say, guys, give me 2 hours and let's randomly generate characters. Because random character generation, you end up with some really cool, interesting things that are not, quote, optimized, but you create really interesting opportunities for characters you would never conceive of. As an example, we've had a really good example of a recent character, because we do some randomization still, even though we kind of pick and choose what we want to play on the table, we do some randomization as well. We end up with like a female gnome prostitute who was elderly, who was missing a hand. I mean, and she was, and her alignments were charity and scorn, I believe. So you end up with some really interesting, kind of like, these really weird combinations that you're like, you would never think of on your own. But when you take the randomization elements and you compact them all together, the composition of that character tells a story that you could say, this does not feel, one, anything like Warhammer, or two, feel like anything I've ever played, like in these hyper-masculine, like combat-heavy games. So I would say to the person in chat, the long and short of it is to say, ask your players to spend 2 hours randomly generating characters and see what they think. You don't even have to run the game, but randomly generate characters and see how they feel about it, and have them literally go through with dice, with the book in front of you, and jointly work to create characters together, and see if they're interested in playing after that. I feel pretty optimistic they will, but character generation really is this big selling point of the game.
I agree. We ended up some awesome characters in ours, and it also takes the players out of their comfort zone by doing the random generation.
Right.
Like, the Grim and Perilous method is the only way to do it, if you ask me, because you're going to end up with such interesting, rich characters, like your known prostitute with one hand.
Yeah, I mean, it's like you when I listen to live casts, I listen to other people play games. Like, it always, we get the female healer, we get the one with the bow, and she's an elf, and blah blah blah, and all these boring fucking stereotypes. I'm like, okay, so with Zweihander, it's like, all right, we're just gonna do random from the ground up. Otherwise, people will not explore these other interesting options, because there are I think it's 127 professions. There's 7 races. There's 27 alignments and all these different social classes and all these different randomization elements that create these really interesting, story-rich, narrative-rich characters that you would never think of to do on your own unless you were forced to randomly roll for it.
Right. That brings me to a question. One of my players actually has a question involving character creation. He was lucky enough to end up with being a magic user, and he loves it. He loves the power that he's going into. So this is, Bill plays Erg Singe Belch, our ogre mage who drinks alcohol and can spit fire. So first off, you want to say he loves the game and he's having a ton of fun playing it.
Great.
But he did notice some limitations in the access to magic limiting higher tier classes during advancement. It's a bit of a long question, bear with me. Of the 90 starting professions available, so far 6 have access to incantation, yet 36 of the 96 expert professions require it. More numbers. 30 of 36 are available as intermediate professions, but only if you got lucky and got an incantation starting profession from day one, such as himself. He's an astrologer, I believe. This forces the vast majority of players to select one of the 6 starting professions as their intermediate profession and locks the vast majority out of those 6 expert level magic using professions.
Mm-hmm.
So he says, I understand the desire to limit magic in a grimdark setting, but why have so many options for it as an intermediate profession?
Good question. So one thing that I like about, and I go back to D&D because it is the foundation of my style of play, or my original game I played, is that I like the idea of like the invokers, the illusionists, all these kind of like super specific types of magic. So when I thought about how we should use magic in Zweihander, I was like, well, let's make it very, very limited so you don't, one, overwhelm a player with a bunch of spells, to create basically this kind of like, and I'm sure you've seen this in D&D games, like antagonistic relationship between like, I'm gonna stack my spells and, you know, undo the narrative against the game master story and all this stuff. Basically gonna break the adventure, which is fine. But when my intention was to severely limit magic. Now, that being said, although the game implies random approach, you can completely select whatever you want. Once you're comfortable with the game, like my players select everything, because they are open-minded enough at this point to say, I'm gonna pick these kind of creative things that, you know, I normally do in a randomization to create these interesting kind of story-rich characters. Now, the intention, though, in the book is that the most randomization elements will end up forcing you into one of the regular professions for your intermediate tier. That is intentional. The expert professions, in fact, I had long considered just to bury in the Game Master section and make it a Game Master only option, much like how they did it in Warhammer First Edition, which we talked about a little bit earlier. Okay. Those kind of advanced professions, advanced careers, I think they called them, were Game Master only elements. I waffled on this a lot because I realize and recognize that there aren't really a lot of, quote, non-magic-y using expert professions in the book. That's why we developed Main Gauche, to basically kind of cover off on the stuff we couldn't shove in the 688-page behemoth. But that being said, we do have all these very specific intermediate tier expert professions because we wanted people to kind of have a very unique niche within magic, something that only they could do. And I think that you see this too in the rules. Every profession in the book has one unique thing they can do nobody else can, and that is a foundation of the system. And the same thing for expert professions. And when you layer in magic on top of that, what you end up doing is you end up creating all these varied number of things that players can do. And ultimately, what it boils down to as a game master is that you need to understand everything the player can do on their character sheet. So if we just said, you know, let's go hog wild, leave every single arcane lore and prayer type open to any magic using class, that would have made things, I feel, it would have put Zweihander in the same position earlier D&D was, which is creating an antagonist relationship between the player and the game master, because the player is constantly trying to tear down the adventure by stacking spells, and it's a weird, ugly side that I've experienced and I've heard other people experience too. So I was like, well, let's limit the options, and because it'll make it limits that, but more importantly, it makes players more unique in what they can do, specifically to magic too. Like they have a very unique set of things that only they can do. So it plays off the foundations of professions having one ability that's unique, and now layering in magic, they have 9 new things they can do that's unique that only they can do.
Cool. No, it makes sense. It makes sense. Awesome. All right, let's jump into another question here. Like I said, take 4 seconds has had a few. Now, the next one, I know you've been, you're always available to answer this question for folks. And it will be where is it? I lost it here. Sorry.
No worries.
Advice for someone who wants to self-publish their own RPG.
Oh gosh. So first and foremost, if you are going to publish anything, the important thing that you need to keep in mind is that you need to keep your audience engaged. Now, there's certainly a social media strategy to do that. You know, setting up Discord, setting up your social media channels is a good way to re-engage people. The problem is that people will follow and unfollow. When, you know, if they feel they're getting bombarded with too many messages, whatever it may be, they may not be monitoring social media. I feel email is a really good way to stay engaged with your audience, because email is not immediate, meaning you don't have to respond back to email immediately. But if you're like me, I have like my morning is I go through some of my kind of fun emails, like my non-work emails, and it's like, oh, cool, this new RPG is coming out, or this new movie is coming out, and then I kind of move on. So I would suggest for any small publisher that you need to find a place to basically curate your audience. And the best way to curate your audience is by using the tools that are already out there, primarily Drive-Thru RPG. Meaning if you decide to self-publish something, even if it's not complete, put it up in their publisher portal and distribute it through there, because then your users, as you kind of, they pick it up for free or they purchase it perhaps, they'll be stored in the Drive-Thru RPG database. And Drive-Thru RPG has a set of fantastic publisher tools you can use to remarket to them through banner ads. You can reach out to them by email because they store all your customer database information in there. My foremost piece of advice, even before you've written something awesome or got artwork lined up or got it laid out, is make certain that you are releasing everything that you do through Drive-Thru RPG, even if it doesn't have a big footprint, small or large, whatever it may be. Because once again, keep your customers in there, and you can re-engage them through email strategies, and you can redistribute all your PDFs through there. Get out of Dropbox. Get off of Google Docs. Don't store your things locally and upload it to some random place. Get your stuff on Drive-Thru RPG and use it as your distribution channel, because it is not only just a marketplace for you to buy things, it's a place for publishers to publish things and curate their audience and re-engage them.
Yeah, and you've definitely done that very well. Zweihander's on sale, once a month? I get an email?
Yeah.
$5.99. Jump on it.
Yeah, the deal of the day is interesting. We got in this weird kind of like pattern. I think it was last year where we had, part of this year and most of last year, where we were deal of the day, I think like between like not a calendar year, but like a full year, 365 days. We were deal of the day 19 times. And it's not because we're gaming the system. It's because the game is selling so well, because the way the deal of the day thing works is that as you sell things, you accumulate publisher points, and you basically, if you accumulate enough, you can submit it into a random raffle of games that rotate in and out. And there's some magic behind that Drive-Thru is not willing to talk about, but they basically rake, stack, order, and prioritize things that are in that randomizer. And depending on how well something's selling, it gets higher priority. So we kind of ended up where it's like constantly on sale. Plus, I mean, I don't know. I dropped the price just to kind of get people to buy it. Like I give it away for free, for Halloween. We give 100 copies. We did Gen Con. We gave away 4,495 PDF copies. Like we had that many downloads after Gen Con, completely for free. We give it these little business cards with the free download kit because we just wanted people to play it.
But it works. Like I think I first became aware of your game because it was offered for free on Drive-Thru RPG. I don't know, earlier this year or late last year, and I bought my copy. Like, that's right. I was happy, and I was more than willing to give you my money after I saw that product. I was impressed, so it's definitely worked.
Yeah. So
let's jump back to things that are going on. Let's go maybe in chronological order. Tetsubo? Is that the first thing that was announced earlier this year of the new things that are happening?
So prior to Gen Con, I had reached out to Graham Davis, one of the original writers on Warhammer, and I'd always been fascinated with this weird artifact of Warhammer history, this game called Tetsubo. And it was written by Dave Morris and Jamie Thompson. And they created basically, this is the full manuscript of the original book here. They had written this way back in the day, right before Warhammer Fantasy Role-Playing Games Workshop were going through kind of a rebranding phase. Basically, they were taking all the kind of icky R-rated stuff out of Warhammer and making a cleaner, more sanitized version fit for retail publication. So during this transition at Games Workshop, both of them, the script for Tetsubo had been turned away. Dave and Jamie went on to do a lot of amazing things. They wrote Dragon Warriors, wrote Fabled Lands. I know that they've done some app development. They wrote for Eidos Interactive. They've got just this amazing catalog of stuff. They're both very good people. They're really nice gentlemen. But they have a huge catalog of novels that they've written. And Dragon Warriors is still an amazing RPG. Fabled Lands is really cool too. So I reached out to Graham Davis. I'm like, okay, so I want to learn a little bit more about Tetsubo. And I want to try to contact these guys and understand if they're ever going to publish it. So we get on a Skype call with them after they connect me, and we have a conversation. I'm like, hey, I'm a big fan of Tetsubo. I've developed this RPG as well. And they're like, oh yeah, we've heard of it. It's amazing. And so I was like, let me send you a copy in the mail. So they live in the UK, so I send them a couple copies. We get back on Skype shortly after Gen Con. I'm like, all right, so I got this idea. Let me pitch it to you. It's kind of crazy. I've never done this before, but can I acquire the license to the original script and rewrite it and make it about Sengoku Japan with some light folklore stuff and layer it into Zweihander's baseline mechanics using kind of that open source roleplay thing we talked about before, where it's released under a Creative Commons license? They're like, that'd be fantastic. So
yes.
the deal comes together very quickly. We're going to have the royalties, all the good stuff. And then we make the announcement. We're thinking 2020 on it. There's a lot of writing ahead of us. There's a lot of artwork. Like Zweihander was illustrated by Dan Mandich. For Tetsubo, we're going to have it illustrated by Ken Duque, our layout artist, because we'll have Dan working on some other projects that we may talk about tonight too. But we want to have illustrated cover to cover, and there's a lot of writing ahead of us. In fact, as we get into progress through next year, quarter one, quarter two, we're going to start releasing some excerpts across our Discord channel, and start kind of having people playtest stuff we're working on. But
cool.
we anticipate this book will be as big as Zweihander. We want to have it chocked full of options. And Sengoku Japan is such a fascinating period for Japan. Before Japan was Japan, in essence, is a time of chaos. It's a time of a lot of war. So it kind of is an interesting story to tell about like how people deal with fighting, right? Like the 30 Years' War is a good example because there's a great analogy between that. There's an analog between that and the Sengoku period of Japan. Without getting into the history here, I feel Tetsubo will be fantastic to plug into that because they wrote it from the perspective of Sengoku Japan, although within the Warhammer world. Stripping out the Warhammer stuff is actually relatively simple because, as Games Workshop said, this was not really fit for Warhammer. It was so, quote, off-brand, they just said, we're not going to use this script. So, 20-odd years later, we're going to bring it to life. We're going to do it justice. Both the original authors are contributing to it. We're envisioning rewriting it from the ground up, which we've worked on a few things already. But the big challenge will be we don't want to make it Legend of the Five Rings. We don't want to make it anything that resembles anything that's on the market now.
Okay.
We feel that its unique niche is Japanese culture, not the kitchen sink of Asian tropes, like no wuxia, no West Asian stuff or East Asian stuff, West Asian stuff like Indian stuff. We're focusing strictly on Japanese culture and Japanese folklore. In fact, the Sengoku RPG, which I absolutely love, we're hoping to draw some inspiration from that. If anybody knows the author of that original RPG, connect me with them. I need to have a conversation with him.
Awesome. Is this going to be a Kickstarter, or is this going to tie into the publishing deal that has just happened?
So yes, both actually.
Okay.
So we're going to bring it to Kickstarter. I'm thinking in March because we want to raise some money to get going on artwork. Artwork is very expensive. For those who are wondering about how publishing works, artwork's very expensive. Between artwork and layout, that's where the majority of the cost goes. The next cost, like if you were to like rank stack order, it's like artwork and layout, editing and proofreading, and then contributing writers if you use other writers. We're mostly writing it in-house, so I don't anticipate having a lot of costs there. But artwork is very expensive. So we're basically going to take Ken and kick him off for 6 months, and he's going to do nothing but artwork for Tetsubo. So we're going to probably have a Kickstarter for that, maybe March. I'm thinking somewhere around after tax season, so it's easier in everyone's pocketbooks. And plus, it's a good time to launch Kickstarters, I think, around like spring, summer. We've done ours traditionally in August, which has worked for us. It's worked very well for us. But I want to be sensitive to how much money people have at their bank account.
Thank you.
And I want to make it inexpensive like Zweihander, too. I mean, we're not really in this to make, this is kind of weird and duplicitous to say, but we're not really in it to make money. We're in it to make like awesome RPGs. And even at the price point Zweihander is, don't let anyone tell you there's no money in RPGs, because there is. It's just a matter of like how much you really want to charge customers. D&D has a great model. Their books are super inexpensive, but they have such massive scale
Mm-hmm.
that they can sell them inexpensively. We are now in a position where we can have the same price points with our new publisher, but we have scale that is kind of beyond our kind of what we can even conceive, what we can do on our own. And this is where the new publisher deal kind of comes in.
Cool. All right. We'll touch on that because it's very exciting. Quick question about Tetsubo.
Mm-hmm.
Someone asked what's the artist's name. They didn't catch it.
What's the what? I'm sorry?
The artist's name.
Oh, Ken Duque. And I hope I'm pronouncing his last name correctly. Sorry, Kenneth. He's done all the artwork for our Magic cards. He's done all of our layout for all of our ancillary products like the folios. He did the artwork for Dark Astral. He did Sellsword #1 on Community Content Library. He's a really great artist. His artwork is a lot like the French artist Mobius. Which I love Mobius's artwork, and that's what really attracted me to Ken in the first place.
How do I spell his last name? I'm going to just throw it in chat here.
It's Duquet.
Awesome, thank you.
Yeah, if you can find him online, good luck.
Yeah, I keep trying to. I keep asking him, when am I going to get another Sellsword? Where's Sellsword 2? I've sent like messages on every platform, and I haven't gotten anything.
I know. I keep him really busy. In fact, I'm still trying to convince him to, because what we're thinking with Sellsword, and I haven't got his buy-in on this yet, but what we like to do is take the best of community content from the Grim and Perilous library and publish it in Sellsword as like an annual thing.
Cool.
That'd be super cool. Yeah, like publish people's like self-created stuff and sharing the wealth with everybody, and everybody gets, everybody's happy. So cool. I'd love to do that.
Old
Ken,
school
if you're listening, I want to do that.
Awesome. Sipping my nog. All right.
No worries.
So, should we jump over the publishing deal? I think that was the next thing that was announced, and we touched on that. And so you have connected with a publisher. Mm-hmm. Zweihander and Gauche are going to be on Amazon, in Barnes & Noble, and in Target stores?
That's right.
Which is huge.
Yeah, so here's kind of how this started. So I'll caveat this by saying I cannot tell you who the publisher is yet, and that's kind of a bullshit answer. But there's a strategy to this, and I will get to that. So this publisher may or may not be local in Kansas City, and you probably would recognize a lot of the properties that they own, primarily because they do not work in the RPG space. I brought Zweihander to them randomly earlier this year. I have a deep background in marketing. I've worked in advertising for 14 years. I wouldn't say I'm a sales guy, but I'm an ad guy, right? I'm Ken Cosgrove from Mad Men. I'm a ad guy in the streets and a writer in the sheets. But I was like, hey guys, I got this RPG, it's moved like at this time, it's like 67,000 copies. I was like, here's my challenge. I can't reach scale. I can't do it on my own. I don't want to sell away the rights to it. I have these principles around open source role playing. I don't want to give that up. What can be done? So this leads to a series of conversations with their board, then their president, their chief editor, and we turn to today. So they have essentially picked up the rights for Zweihander and Gauche, which unfortunately means print on demand is gone on Drive-Thru RPG actually as of today. However, they will help us do fulfillment, distribution, shipping, help us maintain better price points, help us get less expensive print costs, allow us to print better quality volumes, and allow us to reach scale that we can't get through Drive-Thru RPG on our own. So they have relationships with GTS Distribution, which is the primary distribution channel for brick and mortar stores in the United States. 4,500 stores in their entire network. That's key. It's primary. If you like Indie Press Revolutions, kind of like 3 steps down, that there's GTS Distribution. If you're buying a D&D book, you're getting it through GTS. If you're buying a Paizo book, it's coming somewhere probably from Diamond Distribution, who has partnerships with GTS. But essentially, this publisher has a relationship with GTS, allow us to reach scale. More importantly, it'll help us reach the rest of the world, because right now, as I'm sure many people can attest to, when you try to get cards, print-on-demand cards, or character folios, because Drive-Thru RPG's printing facilities are actually in Atlanta, Georgia, it costs an arm and a leg to get it shipped overseas. Mm-hmm. So This will help us be able to take these other products that will follow after we bring these things to Amazon. So we'll slowly migrate our other things to Amazon and in other distribution channels to pick up. So people who are international can pick it up less expensively. Also helps us reach Canada and Australia, which are also two of our larger countries within distribution.
Go Canada.
Yeah,
Yes,
right.
I'd asked you on Discord. I was like, "What does that mean for Canada?" Because we don't have Barnes and Noble and Target up here. So will it be on like Amazon.ca, Amazon UK, Amazon Germany, Amazon Australia? Like, will it be available on all Amazons for people?
Yes, that's right. And in fact, it'll be available in English first. We'll have pre-orders up starting in January on Amazon. It'll ship, I think, around mid to late May for our relaunch. Although the pre-orders you can get right now are technically through my old distributor, this is the guy here locally that I do my book printing through. You can basically stick in quick right now because we shut it all down on the 21st or 23rd. And then you can't pick up the book any longer, save for the PDF version, until we relaunch on Amazon next year.
Okay.
But the Target placement was a big thing for us. So this publisher publishes a lot of poetry. And they have a massive footprint in Target. So when we were identifying our target markets, we're like, we need to hit Barnes and Noble, which is a no-brainer. They have immediate reach there, but we need to hit Target. And we had this interesting conversation about, is Target the right market? And the answer is yes. And here's why. Cards Against Humanity, Exploding Kittens, other games that are not role-playing games have placement on Target shelves. Dungeons and Dragons has starter sets on shelves. And we're like, because when we view Zweihander in the 2019 market, we're not contending with Cubicle 7. We're friendly rivals, sure, but that's not who we need to fight. We've already lapped them. We get to market first. We sold a shit ton of copies, and we're literally like a bunch of dudes in the basement. Our next step is to create a brand around Zweihander, basically the Powered by Zweihander brand. Without going too much into detail, I will say this. Everything we publish from now on will be Powered by Zweihander. And we will use that as the brand around it, everything that we do. And we want, in order to bring that to Target, which we have a foothold in already, we intend to have placement probably by mid-year there. So we'll have placement in Target, Barnes & Noble, Amazon's a no-brainer, GTS distribution, and that will be our channels. We'll have basically, you can buy it online if you don't feel comfortable with Amazon. We'll have like a purchase portal on our site. Our publisher will have a purchase portal on their site too, but this will be the publisher's first foray into the RPG world. And essentially they've kind of they've tasked me with doing the advertising and marketing, but they're doing all the trade marketing, which is something that anybody who works in the publishing world probably knows about. I didn't know anything about it until I got involved in this relationship. But trade marketing is like a whole different ballgame. And this is essentially how you reach GTS, how you reach Target, how you reach Barnes & Noble, how you reach Amazon, things that I have no intuition in. Basically, reaching scale, which is the challenge that we have now, or we don't have any longer, but it was the challenge we faced earlier this year, is like, how do you reach scale? How do you get Zweihander into, 167,000 hands? And this solves for it. So you'll see that this new edition of Zweihander we're working on, or second print edition, I should say, is being branded as our Ennies edition. It's our celebratory edition. It'll have better quality paper, better quality cover. Same with the ribbons. We're doing 2 ribbons on it now. We have new content, new layout, new structure. And then once we relaunch that for sale in January, pre-orders, and then actual shipping in May, Main Gauche will follow in September of 2019. So what I'm saying is Main Gauche cannot be picked up. If you want to get a copy of Main Gauche, you have to get it now before the 21st. Otherwise, you can't get it until next year in September.
Wow. All right. Order away, people. Otherwise, you got a long wait ahead of you.
Yeah, the print on demand thing kind of stung, but we also understand that in order to generate pre-orders and basically sell ISBNs, which is how the publisher views success for a book, you have to shut down print on demand because that we don't get credit for that as a publisher. It's a totally different distribution chain.
Okay. Awesome. For the folks who own the first edition, is the errata going to be available readily out there for them, and all the changes and updates? And
that's right.
Professions are now going to move into the Ennies edition.
So we're not moving Professions, but although we'll have some new content, it won't be a lot of content. It'll be basically stuff that was left on the cutting room table that we wanted to include Main Gauche that really belongs in Zweihander. The first print edition will not be. It'll still be usable. It'll be 99% usable with the asterisk that says download the errata at the website. We will publish all that errata. We'll publish all the additional content that we put into that for people to have on hand. Those of you who have the physical book will get the updated PDF automatically for free. You don't have to worry about that. So you'll at least have the PDF version, but we will do some official errata you can just download and put on 2 pages and stick inside the book for the old first edition. Because we wanted to make certain that the first print edition of this book was not unusable. I know that's like usually what happens, in these situations is people are like, I'm going to do a second edition of my book and it'll be great. And you lose audience because they're like, well, shit, I got to buy a new version. Like, and even though our goal is to generate a ton of pre-orders up to May, we want to sell new copies of the new version. We don't want to make people who invested their hard-earned money in the original Kickstarter versions, the print-on-demand versions of Drive-Thru RPG. We want people to leave them in a lurch because they're still the foundation and the bedrock of our community. So we decided, like, we're not doing a second edition. This makes no sense. Let's do a second print edition, do some fixes, and beg for forgiveness. Because we're trying to give you every single tool we possibly can to ensure that your old edition is not useless. Once again, that errata is like, it's 2 pages at best. Okay. And you can see it right now on grimandperilous.com. We actually have already published the majority of it. There's a few other things we're going to put up there here in the next 72 hours that will kind of close the loop, because we're now in content lockdown for Zweihander, meaning no more changes, which is important for publishing. That's another thing is like eventually you have to stop writing and actually lock stuff in. But we'll have that all available. But the second print edition it'll be pretty phenomenal. It's really kind of our celebratory edition to kind of as a thank you to our fans, and we're going to keep it the same price point. We'd make it less expensive if our publisher would let us. But the good thing is that Amazon buys in bulk. So Amazon will allow people to have like a $5 to $10 discount potentially on the book if they decide to buy it there.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
Awesome. Leon Trout in the chat actually has a question tied to making this deal with your publisher. He says, so maybe this is too insidery, but can you talk about how you convinced a brick and mortar publisher to agree to print such a massive book?
So the original edition, okay, let's talk about the new edition.
Okay.
So the new publisher. So the new publisher, they're very digitally savvy. And they recognize, I think it's kind of a multifaceted answer, because it's not just about me going in and selling Zweihander and it's like this cool thing you can do. It's like it's the cream of the crop. It's like it's the new high. Like, RPGs are cool again. I mean, it is partially that RPGs are cool again. But I think the sales numbers really are what kind of turned them toward it. Because I do have a very strong marketing strategy and strong sales strategy, and they recognize that as this is a category. In the publishing world, they call it categories. Like poetry is a category. Card games is a category. RPGs is a category. They had never explored RPGs as a category, yet they have a number of people within the publishing house who play D&D and other RPGs, including Dungeon World, Into the Sprawl, a bunch of other ones. So I think this kind of attracted them to this idea of like, can RPGs be a worthy category for us? The second part of that answer is that because I'm very intimately connected to not only the publication of the book, the self-publication, but also the marketing and the strategy, that they saw that as a potential strength, because we're now kind of in a conversation about, okay, so 2019 comes around. Our chief editor is not entirely RPG savvy. Daniel, do you want to basically help us lift up this whole brand and create a brand strategy around it and work for us full time? And the answer is, I would love to do that if it makes sense. So that's still TBD. That would be fantastic if I could. But the convincing part was really about talking about sales numbers, talking about the opportunity, and talking about the long term of how Zweihander can be turned into a brand, and how brands have strength. A good example of that is if you read Matthew Inman's The Oatmeal. He, as I'm sure you're well aware, it's like a Cinderella story. He creates exploding kittens, and it's like one of the biggest Kickstarters ever. And it's that he created a whole brand around the oatmeal. So granted, we're not on that level by any means, but the approach to market is similar. The approach to market is to say that there's strength in numbers, meaning sales numbers can, you can basically throw sales numbers into a pro forma, and you can anticipate a number of sales. This is all inside baseball stuff, obviously. But you could basically determine what the success rate of a book potentially could be based on previous sales. And they kind of ran the numbers, and we noodled around with them and talked about what the right run rate was for pre-orders. For like, is it 5,000? Is it 10,000 pre-orders? Is it how much are we going to put 25,000 in the wild? How, all the fun stuff that they know and they're expert in doing, and I can consult on because of the experience with going through that with Zweihander. And then it became a numbers game. It's like, this makes sense for it. It's a new category. It's a competitive edge they have against other publishers in the space. It's their entrance into RPGs, and they have enough clout and enough distribution channels and enough money, more or less, to say it's worth risking. It's a measured risk. It's, it's the business development stuff. Like, it's a measured risk. We can probably take this on, and it will probably work for us. If it doesn't, it won't be a big loss. So I am cautiously optimistic. I feel 90% that I can turn this into a good category for them. I feel that their name and reputation, and more importantly, the stock of people, that their authors who work with them now, will be enough to help kind of raise awareness around it. We've got some strategic deals I'm working on with them to ensure that we can leverage their influencers to help kind of raise awareness around it. But that's the long answer of saying that. How do you convince a traditional publisher to work in the RPG world? Well, it really boils down to sales numbers, and being the right person at the right time, and knowing your shit, for lack of a better term.
Well, it's the perfect recipe. Everything has come together, right? You have the proven numbers, you have the track record, and you have things like Critical Role, which has brought more attention to this hobby than ever before. It's bigger than it's ever been, honestly, than the 80s and 70s and everything. So.
Yeah, I mean, without going too far off topic, Encounter Roleplay is going to start running Zweihander in January. I know it hasn't been announced yet, but they're going to be running a full season, 18 episodes of it, starting in January.
Cool.
So we've got some other things we're working on in the background to continue raising awareness around it. We know digital strategy is important. Digital strategy actually is incredibly important, particularly if you look at the way Dungeons and Dragons has done it.
Mm-hmm.
And we'd love to. We can't go in full bore on that because we don't have that kind of money, but we can kind of chip away at it because we are still an indie RPG. But being an indie RPG doesn't necessarily mean you make no money. There's anyone who tells you there's no money in RPGs is a liar, or they're doing it wrong. I think it was James Raggi announced shortly after Gen Con. He announced, he's like, I just made my 2 millionth euro, which in American dollars is like what, $3.7 million. He's done phenomenally well. He pays everybody, he pays out a ton of royalties. He pays his people really good. And we're following that model into 2019. In fact, some of our other products we're looking at 2019 is beyond Tetsubo. But we'll talk about that soon. I've got plenty of time.
I was gonna get to
I can answer all the questions. We can talk about all the stuff tonight. I have nowhere to go. I'm already at home.
Yes. Okay, cool. I think that answers his question. He also jokingly said, so you're selling Zweihander to Netflix right now for an original series too, right? Is what you're saying.
Oh, wouldn't that be amazing? Actually, it's funny. So over on my shelf, I was talking to the playtesters about this just the other night. So Tales from the Loop won the ENnie's best game in 2017.
Mm-hmm.
Right? This book right here.
Yes, and is being turned into a TV show. Well, it got optioned.
Yeah. So I will give some inside baseball knowledge. There is a trend in the RPG industry to unbury old licenses. There is a longer-term strategy that Games Workshop is working on by unburying Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay. Do not be surprised if you find Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay return to figurines on the tabletop again. I will tell you that. Because these licenses are being dug up because Hollywood is finally coming around to discover, oh my God, RPGs, 30-odd years of RPGs, there's all these amazing stories and licenses and characters and depth of knowledge and creatures, all these cool things that are like ripe for the plucking. So Tales from the Loop gets picked up by Amazon. I mean, it's incredible. And I would love for that to happen with Zweihander. That'd be fantastic.
Yeah.
That's not necessarily what we're aiming for. It'd be fantastic if it did. So, but but for now, we're focusing on RPGs, and I think that it's an astute observation, like to say that, because you saw the movie Bright on Netflix. Like you see all these kind of interesting things that are like, being a nerd. I mean, there's a difference between a geek and a nerd. And like, if you play games, you're a nerd. Self-professed nerd here. I'm a basement nerd my entire life. Played games, and it's amazing that we can monetize our nerdiness. It's weird. It's weird to think about that we can basically take these kind of silly games that we kind of create, and we basically play really complex games or pretend with our friends.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like this really complex version of Cops and Robbers. We tell these stories, and it's amazing. And beyond the kind of theory wank stuff, like Hollywood sees value in that. They see value in these licenses. That's why Dungeons and Dragons is being completely relaunched. We're going to see television show. We see new comic books coming out. I mean, all kinds of stuff, because you have all these writers who, like the people listening, who made things, produce things, who write things, and Hollywood has, and I'm sure you've seen this, like Hollywood just produced a lot of the same old films.
Yes.
So these things have value, and these things are being recognized by Hollywood. And I think it's fantastic that Tales from the Loop is like one of the first major like indie RPGs by Fria Ligan.
Free League. Yep.
Yeah, Free League, right? Sorry, in Swedish, free whatever it was. They've been picked up, and of course, if you know anything about Modifius, their CEO has a background in licensing and film. So it's not surprising to see that happen. It's an amazing thing, and it'd be great if it happened to anybody else too.
Mm-hmm. And we're also seeing a bleed into video games, which would be cool.
Absolutely.
Zweihander video game, right? We got Cyberpunk coming out, which was a game I played back in the early 90s. And I remember, like, I played, and then I walked away from the hobby, and I came back, and I was like, man, do you guys remember Cyberpunk? And everyone's like, what are you talking about? And then the game was announced. I was like, oh my God, it's a video game. Like, it was one game that always stuck with me, and I'm so pumped for that video game now. I'm going to just max out my cool stat.
Yeah, I met the author at Gen Con, and it was kind of one of those kind of like, oh my god, it's Mike Pondsmith, oh my god, like this is really real. And like we chatted, had a great conversation. After that, I went and walked over to the Cubicle 7 booth and talked to T.S. Lucar for like 25 minutes and met like all these really cool people. But you can see like there are people at Gen Con who are walking booths and looking and doing research to look at licenses to pick up for video games, for film. This is like a really real thing.
Yeah.
So we're in the heyday, so to speak. It's not just that RPGs are geek chic. It's that I personally don't see the bubble bursting, because it is a whole new world that licensors rather are exploring now, and we will continue to bleed over into video games and online media and film, and it's not going to stop.
Right. No, I agree with you 100%. It was like the tip of the iceberg right now with the new D&D movie and Tales from the Loop. Mm-hmm. Awesome. All right. Where should we go from here? Do we want to talk about things to come?
Yeah. So 2019. So I literally just got off a call prior to this with Ken Duque and Adam Rose. So here is what we're planning for 2019. First and foremost, we'll have a relaunch of Zweihander. You pre-order that starting in January on Amazon, or you can pre-order it now if you get in quick before we shut it all down on my home site, grimandperilous.com. Main Gauche will see commercial release in September of 2019. We have Tetsubo, which we'll launch the Kickstarter sometime in 2019, but it will probably not come out until 2020, just being realistic here. However, we have another project, because I mentioned before when we talked about like revenue models at work, RPG models at work, talk about James Raggi and the fact that he took this D&D like game and basically turned it into like this multi-volume, like a ton of writers writing for them and producing a ton of content. Well, we decided to dip our toe into that. We have 2 things that are coming out that are TBD, but we believe the first will come out in 2019. So this is a writer named Bill. We acquired a script for something called Gazetteer the Grotesque. It is almost written. It is going to basically solve for people have been wondering, like, can I get like a built-in campaign role with an adventure and a map and stuff? And Gazetteer the Grotesque Volume 1 will speak to that. It's a really interesting, kind of low fantasy, heavy folklore thing that Bill's worked up. It's really, really neat. We've read probably a quarter of it. He's continuing to write kind of in the background. You probably won't find him online, but he's an amazing writer. The artist he's working with is actually a tattoo artist, and he does these incredibly evocative pieces of artwork. So we've acquired rights to that. It's going to be published under the first book published under Powered by Zweihander.
Okay.
You'll be able to pick that up probably mid-year. We're going to launch a Kickstarter for that probably May or June, I think, once we have it all buttoned up. The second thing is actually something from my home campaign world that we're actually playtesting now. So Sammy Usalo wrote this really cool unofficial adventure for Warhammer called Queen of Embers. Amazing campaign. It's got so much story depth there, but it feels so not Warhammer that I was like, all right, this can work in Zweihander. So what we decided to do, we just penned a deal not more than 2 weeks ago. We acquired the script for that. So Sammy and myself and the playtesters are now working on, we're playtesting around the table. We're actually recording those sessions and plan to release them on our Grim and Perilous podcast Patreon, which launches, I think, in February, to basically show you how we playtest a game from the ground up, how we write a campaign and story, and then publish it. We're going to go from basically, we're going to show people how to play test all the way to publication. It's basically going to be kind of like the story from end to end. We want to kind of show this to people to say, if you want a model to create something, follow this. So we're going to do this. So that's going to be published in my campaign world. It's still yet unnamed, but it's going to be plugged into my 22-year-old campaign world, at least a small part of it. But we'll talk more about that probably turn of year. It's kind of a little bit lower on the priority scale, but those are the two big things for 2019. Tetsubo, once again, 2020. My hope is that everything that we do will go through our new publisher. Basically, the way it kind of works with the publisher is you basically give them first rights. Like, hey, if you guys want to buy this, you can buy it and publish it and do that whole thing. So our new model essentially is to say, okay, things that we pick up are not necessarily written by us, but other people. We are looking for good writers. We're using the Grim and Perilous library as basically kind of like an unofficial testing bed to find good writers and good quality material, to work with them to create really good, solid manuscripts that tie into the Powered by Zweihander brand, to take it to Kickstarter, see what the interest is on Kickstarter, see if there's enough pre-orders to justify taking that back to the publisher. Then the publisher makes a decision, yay or nay. Do you want it or do you not? If they don't want it, then we just continue publishing as is. Right. If they do want it, we reach like massive scale like we're about to do as Zweihander and Main Gauche, then everybody's happy and we have this big brand, and we kind of follow the James Radke model, but we do it at a scale that's not homegrown, kind of all the hard stuff like, how much do you pay a shipper? And how do you box things up so they don't get damaged in shipping? And how do you reach stores? And how do you reach scale that you can't do beyond your basement? Like, they solve for all that, and we intend to use this Powered by Zweihander model to push through material throughout 2019. With basically 3 or 4 things in the can now, I'm sure 2020 will be even bigger. We're now in the process of actually hiring people, probably half to full time, to work on artwork and layout. Ken Duque, as an example, will be working on nothing but Tetsubo for the foreseeable future after he gets out of the woods with laying out Zweihander and Main Gauche. I would love to form an in-house studio at some point, but that's still, we're getting closer. But the way it basically works from a business perspective is you never hire yourself first, you hire everybody else first.
Okay.
The contractor-contractee relationship works really well. Green Ronan's been doing it for years. They got it figured out. It's a good model to follow. James Radke has got a good model, though he still ships things by hand, which is, I can't imagine the nightmare of doing that. He's follow the leaders, essentially, is that we don't need to do things different. We have to basically follow the leader and retain our principles, the things that we did for Zweihander and Main Gauche, and remain connected to the community and continue at low price points so that we can make it sustainable, because there's no sign of this slowing down at all, not only just across the industry, but for us. So 2019 is basically going to be kind of like, 2018 was like, all right, we're the young scrappy dog. And now we've lapped Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay 4th edition, and we're trying to move beyond Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay Shadow, because we know that a lot of people bought into Zweihander because Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay 3rd edition was out. Nobody liked that edition.
Yeah.
Well, some people did. I did. There's things that are great about it, some things that really suck about it. But we are trying to kind of move beyond that shadow of that and test, is Zweihander as a brand sustainable across other types of RPGs? I think it is, because it was written from the perspective of my own campaign. I think it is because people are clearly using it for things other than Warhammer. And I'm hoping, 2019 will be basically a way to say that, how can this thing belong in a world where Dungeons and Dragons is still king? We don't need to outsell Dungeons and Dragons. We just need a small portion of their market, because we've already got majority of Cubicle 7's market. We've already proved that. So we just need to see, is this interesting beyond that? And the way that I intend to do that is by looking at other small writers like myself and saying, can we plug this into something you've written? And do you have a long-term strategy for developing continuous work like James Raggi does? And I think the answer is yes. We'll see, but cautious optimism. I'm 90% on it. I always say that, but I really do feel that the people we've brought to the table, that the artists and the editors and proofreaders, we have a new proofreader on, Jen Ford. We continue to work with Matthew Pook. Peter Lattimore, Garblag Games, is doing our cartography. Yes. Ken Duquet, is doing our layout and artwork. Dan Manditch, Adam Rose, all the people around my table, Walter Fulbright, Nick O'Hare, Tim Coron. I mean, there are just so many people I can rattle off who, are part of the playtest bed that really sharing the same principles that I do, the idea of open source role play, making things inexpensive for people to pick up, making it all inclusive in one book, and really making stuff that people can share and create their own stuff without having to worry about Games Workshop lawyers zapping them from the sky for creating the violate IP, because we're a very non-IP IP, right? The IP is powered by Zweihander, but you can take the writing and do what you want with it. We're not going to sue anybody. But we believe really strongly in those principles. And I genuinely think that because we are bringing to the table inclusivity, particularly in the artwork, in the writing, although, it's kind of weird to say, you're writing Grim and Perilous stuff, but how can you be sensitive to, quote, SJWs? But really it's just about being sensitive to the reality of the world. And we feel that in the writing and the way that we do things in our own principles, that we can do this right. And that we can hopefully one day, be as big as Cassium. That'd be amazing. I mean, I met those guys out at Gen Con, and I met with the guy who did Delta Green, and it's like these are my heroes. These are people that I emulate, and I'm like, I want to be like that. How can I make this happen? And I think that if you look at good people in the industry and you try to follow their lead, and even the people who are kind of icky that you may not like some people are doing some things right, some people are doing things wrong, and you can take that and apply those lessons to your own business, your own marketing, your own writing, and hopefully, create something that could, one day turn in from, a $7,000 little Kickstarter into what's kind of become this weird phenom for a really silly little RPG that we wrote. And it's so exciting to talk to you and others who are kind of tuned in to really hear your voices and to hear that you're playing it and sharing it and hear your criticism. We love criticism. We love constructive feedback. And that's part of the development process. We need that. We want that. And I feel that with that relationship we try to maintain with the community, that's going to be what helps sustain us the long term. Even as we get, as our shoes get bigger and where our volume of stuff we produce gets larger, we don't want to divorce ourselves from those principles. So I'm really hoping that we can count on everybody's support and loyalty and helping us talk about in good ways and critical ways of Zweihander and all of its derivatives, and really just continue helping us have good conversations about RPG development, because that's really what it's about. We're all telling really complex pretend games of cops and robbers at the end of it. And,
essentially, yeah,
it's what it is, and that's
what
making RPG. I mean, despite the fact that you look at Mike Morales and other people in the industry, and at the end of the day, they're just There's the dudes who are playing games. I use dudes not in a gendered way, but it's like we're just a bunch of people playing
Yeah.
RPGs at the end of it. We're enjoying doing it. We're monetizing your hobby, and it's something we're passionate about. And I'm extremely passionate about Zweihander. I think that shows in some ways, in good ways and bad ways. I can certainly say that there's a point where you talk about lessons before, like over marketing sometimes is bad. Finding the right channels is good, but more importantly, learning lessons and applying them. That's incredibly important, as anybody who's trying to break into the industry is. Apply your lessons that you learn and try not to step backwards. Don't make the same mistake twice. That's my parting bit of advice for any would-be person who wants to publish out there is learn from your mistakes and listen to your community, because those are the people that are essentially putting money in the kitty, but more importantly are your test bed for understanding what works and what doesn't work.
Awesome. No, it's very good advice. Very good advice for anything in life, really.
Yeah.
I'd say. But I'm gonna switch gears here because there's been a couple questions about this. So
Sure.
I want to touch on it because people have asked about it a couple times now. Virtual tabletop. Someone asked about Fantasy Grounds. Is there any plans? And I know that you have thrown cash money on the table for someone to make that. And someone else mentioned plans for virtual tabletop. So I'm assuming that's Fantasy Grounds as well because it's on Roll20. That's what we play on. So.
Yeah, so I am literally on the hunt for somebody to help us develop for Fantasy Grounds. I've been looking and can't find anybody who has the free cycles right now to basically convert this to Fantasy Grounds. So if you're watching, if you're listening, if you're in chat and you know somebody or you yourself are looking to do some development work, I'm hiring, and I'm hiring like yesterday. We kind of in the same thing for Roll20. It's funny, we actually live in the same town where Roll20 is based.
Oh, cool.
But I've never had a conversation with them because they're the hardest people to get a hold of. They don't respond to messages, I guess, right? And I'm like, hey man, I got money, let's do some stuff together. We know that digital strategy and digital initiatives are important, particularly as we begin to move away from print on demand. We want to have a full suite of Zweihander, main Gauche, Tetsubo, all the good stuff supported on Fantasy Grounds. Even though we don't play online, we know that the community does, and that's important. So if you know anybody, if anybody's listening or you are a developer, reach out to me at daniel@grimandperilous.com or just at me on Twitter, and we'll have a conversation because, like I said, I'm looking to hire like literally yesterday.
There's a lot of people wanting it.
Yeah.
I can second that. Cool. So you want to have like the full suite, like you can buy the core book on each of those platforms, and then you can just kind of drag and drop, and you've got all the rules then built in. That's what you're looking for someone to build on both of those. Yeah,
because Zweihander is very modular, and I think that if we can find the right kind of UX person to make that happen, because so being an ad guy, I'm big on experience design, customer experience design, and Fantasy Grounds has a very fantastic, verbose, if not complex system. We would want to find somebody who can help us kind of hump the challenge of how do you turn a 688-page book into a consumable format specific to digital, because it's not just about like importing an SRD. It's not as simple as that.
Right.
There has to be some user design experience lessons applied there, because you can import the entire book and it'll be fantastic, but if the user experience sucks, nobody's going to use it. So what we're looking for is somebody who's a developer who has UX design background who can help us kind of figure out the best way to do it. Preferably somebody who's worked with Fantasy Grounds before would be great. But yeah.
All right, there you go, folks. There's the answer. I figured I knew it already because you've thrown it out there a number of times, like, hey, I need someone. Call me, contact me.
We've been fishing. We've thrown some big lures out there, but we're just not snagging anything, or at least anybody who's available right now. So that'd be fantastic.
Someone asked here. So it sounds like you're looking for a Zweihander engine and then layer on relevant source material. Yeah, I think that's exactly what you're getting at there.
I think that's a good call out too, because I think that even Zweihander, the core book, can be stripped even further down to the real nuts and bolts of the system. I would love to do something free, because unfortunately we had to take our SRD down with our new publisher relationship, which is really disappointing. However, we know that we will still want to produce a free version of that, kind of like how D&D has basic rules that are available. Yep. We would love to hire somebody to do that for us. Frankly, it's a little bit too weighty for us right now. We can't really fit it into our schedule. for an immediate term, but we would love to hire somebody to basically take Zweihander and kind of empower them to say, all right, what belongs, what doesn't? How can we strip this down to its barest essentials to make it usable and to relaunch the SRD in a way that won't perturb our publisher, but also is applicable for digital initiatives. Like D&D, they don't do PDFs, save for the basic rules. Their big focus is digital initiative. And I think that we can kind of adopt the same thing. We need to find somebody. I mean, if anyone's out there and wants to take on the work, I'm paying to basically take ownership of Zweihander and strip it down to its barest essentials and help us recreate a free version. Reach out to me.
Again, I'll put his email in the description. We put this on YouTube and everything. It'll be in there.
That'd be great.
Talking about the Grim and Perilous engine, you've hinted at some other settings. Pirates may have kind of come up, pirates or ship warfare. And the one that fascinates me the most is like a low fantasy Western.
Yeah. So,
that's the one that's got my attention.
Yeah. So first I'll talk about the kind of high seas piracy thing. So our artist, Dan Bandich, who lives in Serbia, he and his gamers play Zweihander. And they are writers. They write stuff, right? So, us artists kind of hang out with other artists, and Dan being an artist, he's a university teacher. They all play Zweihander. They've been writing their own stuff for a while, and it's all in Serbian. So we had this conversation earlier in the year about how can we bring that to publication? This is way before Gen Con. So I was like, Dan, I don't know. Let me kind of get my feet underneath of me, because this is the point where we had just reached reached platinum status on Drive to RPG, and I was like, I gotta work at the Grim and Perilous library, and I gotta work in this free version, still gotta do the RCD, so give me a few months to figure it out. So we had the conversation again, and we're gonna do a formal kickoff early next year to talk with him and his group about bringing not just one but a series of books that are powered by Zweihander to the American public in English and Serbian. It'll be potentially the first Serbian RPG ever created. Which is super exciting. He's actually one of the first RPG artists from Serbia. One of the first artists in Serbia to do artwork in an RPG. He's a really unique position. Serbia is a really interesting country. By the way, the American dollar translates really well there too. So he's raked it in on artwork and stuff. But we're gonna work with him and his group. They all speak English really well. They understand the American colloquialisms. I can email Dan and he gets it. He's in our Google Hangout that we use for our company. We do Skype calls and stuff. So we're gonna have a conversation in January about how we can do that. I don't have a timeline on that yet, but it is definitely in the works. I feel confident that we'll do it because one, we owe him because he's done an amazing job with us, and two, I know the writing will be fantastic. I have no doubt about that. And because the Powered by Zweihander kind of system is solid and in place, it'll be easy to back in mechanics to it. So that's the first thing on the pirate stuff, because although I'm not a big fan of pirates, I know a lot of people are, and a lot of our other playtesters are, so including Adam Rose. So I know that we will be able to find a way to make it work. We basically told Dan, yes, we're going to do it. The question is, when will we do it?
Right.
So the low fantasy Wild West thing, we put out a call earlier in the year to have people generate some one pages for us, give us a prospectus on what you think this could look like. We received, I think, 69 or is it 67 or 69 submissions that we've still been combing through. Unfortunately, and I feel bad about this because they all came in at the same time where all the stuff was building up with the publisher, and of course we're worrying about taxes, getting all that stuff buttoned up for 2018, and all the not fun stuff about running a business. So unfortunately, that kind of took a back seat. But we're going to revisit it again in Q1 because we do want to bring a low fantasy Grim and Perilous game to market. We have a name for it. It's going to be called Peacemaker.
Somebody mentioned it in the chat.
Yeah, so Peacemaker is what we want to call it.
Word has gotten out.
Yeah, so that is the name we would like to use for it. We have some founding ideas. As an example, the first thing that when you think about when we thought about Tetsubo and we thought about Peacemaker, we're like, what's a defining mechanic that kind of like unifies the two? And it's like, it's the duel.
Yeah.
It's the showdown, right? So we created this kind of showdown mechanic, like kind of framed like a straw man for Tetsubo. We polished it up. We're like, all right, this is awesome. This is great. And like, wait, this is also like a great feature for Peacemaker. And then we create a version for that. And we're like, all right, this makes sense. We have to do it. And so we started jotting down, like, here's all the professions. Like, we worked out all the professions for Peacemaker, and we haven't even agreed with who we're going to have write it yet. But we intend to play a consulting role, a publisher role in this. We will likely hire somebody or some bodies to help write it. We'll back the mechanics for Zweihander or Powered by Zweihander into it.
Mm-hmm.
We do want to do it. I don't know if it's going to happen in the early part of 2019, but I would imagine that we will probably have our cast of characters, meaning our writers, locked in by mid-year.
Okay.
So that we would intend to bring it to Kickstarter in early 2020. Should the stars align, which I feel that they probably will. But yeah, we are really eager to do that because I'm a big fan of Shambara films, so that's where my Tetsubo thing comes. And I love westerns. I grew up on westerns. A lot of people are like, "Oh, Good, Bad, and the Ugly," and I'm like, no. Once Upon a Time in the West is the best western ever told, and if we can reproduce that in an RPG, we got it. So we're also trying to convince some of my playtesters to write too. They've written some stuff in Zweihander previously. They're contributors to the book. One in particular is a big Deadlands fan, but the big question is like, when you decide to write an RPG, it's like, what is different about what you're doing than anybody else is doing? Like, how do you not make this turn into Deadlands? And we have some ideas. We have some really good ideas. I'm a big fan of there's an RPG that came out on Steam called Hard West.
Okay.
That is like it's really intriguing.
Did it just come out recently, or it's in test form?
No, Hard West came out, I believe, a year and a half ago.
Okay, I'm thinking
it kind of went without little fanfare, but it proposed this idea of like an old west that was kind of in this, like, I wouldn't call it post-apocalyptic, but if you're a fan of like Cormac McCarthy, the writer who wrote a ton of amazing stuff, he writes like in this low fantasy, grim, Wild West sort of thing. It's like his kind of his shtick, if you will, for his writing. Okay. It's like if we can marry that with some of the precepts in Hard West, the idea of like the devil actually like, corrupting people and giving them bad, wrong, fun powers, and how that impacts life in like not a post-apocalyptic Western, but a very real alternative Earth, not necessarily like Walking Dead and shit like that from the other Wild West RPGs, Deadlands, but doing something kind of unique. We have to find out what the unique thing is still. Once we figure out what the unique thing is about it and say that this is our touchstone, our North Star this is a unique thing that Peacemaker will do, then we can say, all right, we can dedicate time, we can dedicate money, we can dedicate writers to it. And we're getting pretty close to what that one thing is through these submissions. Our intention is that of these submissions we receive, of the 67 or 69 submissions, that we will say, hey, you writer, okay, you're going to be the creative director on this, and we're going to have you help write it and pay them and give them royalties and all that fun stuff. So we will probably lock that in the first, I would say, quarter 1, quarter 2 of next year, with the intention to launch the Kickstarter in 2020.
Cool. All right. I'm looking forward to that. That one, ever since it was hinted at, I was like, oh, you have my attention. I'm a huge Western fan also. I love Westerns. So, especially Sergio Leone. Those are the best movies. All of them that he did. So, awesome. Cool. Well, there's some good news there, folks. We haven't had any other questions. Is there anything else that we want to touch on, or any other news or announcements that you may have?
Oh, gosh. No other. I think it's pretty much it. Yeah, this is all I can talk about right now. There's a few other things going on in the background that I'll probably start hinting at on Twitter once I'm allowed to. There's a really big contract deal that's happening behind the scenes that's a little bit bigger than our publisher. I really want to talk about now, but I can't as much as I'd love to. But I will say this. So watch for Encounter Roleplay. Will be running the Zweihander game. He'll be writing an original story for it. I'm curious what he's going to write, because I told him, I said, I would love to publish whatever you're writing. That'd be super cool. So we'll see what happens. They're going to make an official announcement, I believe, here soon. I know that he's still gathering all of his players, and we're working on some marketing material for it. But you'll be able to see that on Encounter Roleplay sometime in January. So bug Will about it. Tell him you heard it from me. The contract is signed. It's happening. We're super excited for that. But other than that, I would say just continue following us. I'm on Twitter at Zweihander RPG. Naturally, you can always find us at grimandperilous.com, our home website. We're going through a big website redesign in January, so some things will be changing. But come to our Discord.
Yes, come to the Discord. Join us.
We've got like 350 members now, I think. Everyone's pretty active. There's a lot of good conversation there. Like you mentioned earlier on the interview, is that I'm there on the chat. Adam Rose is on the chat. Mm-hmm. We've got some of our playtesters in the chat now too. So you can reach anybody who's had their hands, who's been elbow deep in Zweihander since the beginning. We try to make ourselves available. We want to talk to you, the community. We want to hear feedback. We'd love to hear more about like what you'd like to see from us in 2019 and beyond. We would love to find people to help us work on Fantasy Grounds. We're probably going to pull out some open casting calls for adventures and other stuff here soon. So stay tuned for that. We want to work with people who are fans of Zweihander. we want to find people who don't really have a foothold in the industry and really kind of lift them up and help them enjoy the same success that I and others have had with Zweihander. We want to lift others up and help kind of teach them. And we'd love to hear from you guys. So join us on Discord. I'm sure the link will be shared out in the chat.
I just threw it in there now for everybody who's in the chat.
Awesome. We love and appreciate everybody who's helped support Zweihander through the years. Once again, it's really due to our fans and our community for turning this into this really cool, awesome RPG. And it's weird. I still get goosebumps when I see people play the game. Like I watched your viewing of it, and I was like, our playtesters were watching it. We're like, oh my god, they're playing our game, and it's on Twitch. And like, it's just,
really,
it's still such a weird thing to watch. Like when somebody's actively playing your game. I mean, it's very humbling because it's kind of a form of validation. It's like, yeah, cool, people like our stuff, but. But also it's like, I believe, I hope that it comes through in the writing and the way that we kind of talk and communicate with fans, that we really want to kind of empower people like you and others to become creators and to give you the tools to create without worrying about violating IP, because we're strong believers in open source role playing and making things free to play, making things distributable and fun and awesome. We love seeing things that people create, the Grim and Perilous content library. We love watching people play. Like I listen to people's play on podcast at work because it's just so cool to hear about how people tell different stories or interpret the rules. But the stories are what draw me in. I think I mentioned earlier in the interview that I'm a damn dirty storyteller at the heart of it, and I love storytelling games. I think that is it's so foundational, really, to the way that we interact as human beings. Not to get all high and philosophical here, but I believe RPGs are a way we can kind of bring ourselves together. It's kind of like no matter what color you are, what your sexuality is, or whatever it may be, whatever you're into, or what your politics are, like RPGs are a way to bring people with different opinions and different views in the world together and create interesting, fun stories. And we see Zweihander kind of like that. It's like here's this thing that you can play. Like my son's 2 years old. I'm gonna teach him to play as Zweihander when he's old enough. It's just I get this basically. If I continue having children, I've got one now, but if I have another, it's like a built-in test bed of playtest.
Right.
It's like people move away, but your children will play, Zweihander. No, we really just enjoy listening to hearing people's feedback on the game, the good, the bad, and the critical. We love critical feedback. That's the stuff that's super helpful for us. Like praise is awesome. I love praise, but critical feedback is what's the most valuable because it helps creators like myself figure out how do we change this in future versions, or how do we rewrite? How do we envision this? Like if we, God forbid, we ever do a second edition, which I can't. By the way, I'm not saying we're going to do a second edition. I cannot even imagine doing that. But how we develop for the future games and stuff, and we love hearing from people who play it and run it and give us feedback. Talk to us in Discord. Hit us up on Twitter. Talk to us. We want to hear from you. I think that's the best part about role-playing games. Is even though I'm in my basement, which we call our office, is where we play our game every Wednesday with the same playing testers for the past 7 years. I like hearing from people online because people run games differently, and I love hearing about people's different experiences and the things that they would change, the things that they house rule. I love hearing about house rule. And house rules are so cool because this is essentially like a big set of house rules,
Right.
in essence, right? And so hearing how people change the game and evolve the game is always really cool to hear because it makes me think about like, okay, maybe I can integrate that house rule into my game, and how can I can evolve and change out for future versions of Zweihander or whatever it may be. So that's my parting thought. Thank you so much for having me on, and thank you all for joining us. This is super cool. I love doing these video interviews because I'm a little bit type A personality. I like talking about myself, but more importantly, I like talking about Zweihander.
And we like hearing about Zweihander, so it's a perfect match. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for your time. Thank you so much for agreeing to do this. I really appreciate it. I love the game, and like I said, Zweihander is going to continue to be a part of the channel. It's what I started the channel on. It's helped me build a foundation, and my players and I want to keep going back to it, so it's going to always be a part of this channel.
Great. Well, thank you all. Thank you once again for having me. Appreciate it.
Yeah.
See you guys. Take care.
Thanks so much, everyone. Have a great night.
Bye.